Welcome to the Project Management Happy Hour. Our aim is to share frank and honest discussion about real-world issues in project management, but do it in a way that's not too dry, though it might get a bit salty sometimes.
Top shelf replay, stage direction in the boardroom.
If you're admiring project leaders who can take a big group of personalities with complex relationships going back centuries, and you see them do that, and you think, man, that is magic. Oh, we're here today to introduce you to Sheila Morago, an absolute expert in managing executives in high-stakes meetings.
In my career, I've never seen anybody better at managing a boardroom to success than Sheila Morago. And this is one episode I keep coming back over and over and referring to, and it is definitely worth a replay, maybe two.
Welcome to Top Shelf Replay. It's time for us to revisit an episode that was so good, it deserves to be talked about twice.
Yeah, we've been doing this podcast for 8 years, and we reference our earlier episodes all the time. And this one in particular, we aired Stage Direction in the Boardroom on May 1st, 2018. That seems like a long time ago.
Yeah. One of the things that happens in a project manager's career is in the beginning, structuring a meeting, making sure everybody gets through things with a bunch of people who are mostly part of just getting the work done is a challenge in and of itself that requires a certain type of approach. But whenever you become a senior project manager or a program manager or portfolio manager or director, the job changes from how do I get these 8 people to agree on the due dates of things and changes to how do I get opinions and perspectives and competing criteria for success to be agreed on, and then an overall measure of success and high-level strategy created from that. And it takes a very different skill to be able to do that than whenever you were a junior project manager. And I think Sheila covering this today is a huge lesson for our project managers who are wondering about what that leap is whenever you sort of feel like you've hit a ceiling. This skill is what that leap is.
It really is. If you are trying to make that change from tactical project manager to leader, then listen to this podcast multiple times, because it's less about I need to get the stuff done. It's more about I need to get these people to understand and work with each other and accomplish things together.
We'll play the episode for you as it originally aired. And at the end of the episode, we're going to come back with what our learnings have been from those 8 years ago. There were things that I heard that I didn't fully absorb and have now fully understood. We'll give you insights on how to manage those big personalities from folks who have become now executives in these boardrooms with even more insight.
Let's jump in.
Sheila, could you tell us a little bit about your role with OIGA?
Sure. I'm the executive director of the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association. It is a nonprofit trade association where we represent all the tribes in the state of Oklahoma that have gaming or casinos, whichever word you want to use.
That's a pretty specialized role. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the journey that took you to this position?
Jumping into the deep end of the pool all the time with no floaties. It actually started in operations. I was working in hospitality when my tribe opened up its first tribal casino. They came and asked me to come and work for them. Considering I was in the restaurant business, they wanted me to be the food and beverage director. That position was filled, and they said, wait, you could be marketing director. So they hired me as the marketing director. It was a small little tiny facility with 350 machines. It grew into 3 new casinos, opening up 2 within 30 days of each other.
Wow.
And it was, I don't need sleep, apparently, according to my boss.
No one does.
According to my boss at the time, he said, you can sleep when you die. But during that time, I was able to work, and my tribe would sort of loan me out to different organizations for my skills in, if nothing else, ordering catering. So I got to work in TC, and when a job came open in Washington, D.C., the guy that I worked with in Arizona became the executive director for the National Indian Gaming Association. Called me up one day and asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, you got to stop that because you're flying to D.C. in 2 weeks because you're my new director of public relations. So, make a long story short, went from NIGA as Director of Public Relations to back to Arizona to run the outreach campaign for the Proposition 202. They hired me on to be the new executive director for AIJ from there. I was there for 8 years, and Oklahoma offered me a job I couldn't refuse, doing the same thing, but here in Oklahoma. So that is a long way of getting around that. I started in operations and ended up over here by just when people said, you need to come here, I go, okay.
Well, it seems like you must like this field then. So then what would you say is your favorite thing about being in the field?
It is, people work hard forever for their heart and their head to work in the same spot. And I am lucky enough to have been able to do that for the last 20 years. So I love what I do. It helps my people. It helps all tribes. And I have a skill set that actually works for this particular kind of job. So it all works together. And I'm really lucky that I'm able to do this.
I know we've got a project management podcast, but can you tell us a little bit more about the cool benefits that the tribes get from this? Because that was something that always really fascinated me when I had an opportunity to work with you, is just to see the cool things that come out of this industry.
Absolutely. Tribal gaming is what you would call basically a 100% taxed industry. So while we are making a lot of money, and some tribes are making some are making a lot more than others, but all the money goes back into the tribe for government services. So basically, it's the tax base for the tribal governments. It goes to building hospitals. It goes to scholarships and building schools. It goes to infrastructure. Take a tribe, as you well know, Kim, in Arizona. Their land base is the size of Connecticut, right? I mean, the state of Connecticut, that is one tribe's land base. It needs, imagine the amount of money it needs to put infrastructure in there. There are still people that live there that are in mud homes, no electricity, no running water. And that's what tribal gaming does. It helps with scholarships. It helps with healthcare. It helps with infrastructure. All the things that a municipality would use their tax dollars for, that's what tribal gaming gives.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it is. So when you think about it in those terms, you realize how lucky you are to work in this industry that provides so much for so many people if you just do this part of your job.
Like, that's got to feel so awesome. That's great.
It does. It does. There's some days you don't want to get up to go to work, but, that kind of stuff just kind of pulls you through all the bad stuff.
Speaking of maybe some of those bad things, this is one of my favorite questions, is what is the most valuable lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
To listen. You know me well, Kim. You know that I don't do that well. I tend to like to bully and talk over people. Listening to tribal leaders, listening to their end goal, listening to the concerns of stakeholders, state lawmakers, federal lawmakers, the federal government employees. Everybody has an end goal, and you have to listen to what it is they're actually telling you so that you're able to deliver what it is they want. If you don't listen, then you go off shooting in the wrong direction sometimes. And trust me, I've been slapped on the hand more often than not for not listening and doing my own thing and getting probably in the weeds a little bit.
Did you have a moment, or were there just several things that led to a time where you were like, ooh, looking back, maybe I should have done that a little bit differently?
All the time. Sometimes you have to go at something multiple times in different ways. But yeah, especially when I started out, very headstrong, thought I knew everything, thought I was right about everything. And it was actually one of the elders in my tribe who pulled me aside and said, you might want to just sit down for a little while and just listen. And every time I would open my mouth, she'd look at me and she'd tell me just that look of, you better shut up. that only an auntie can do to you. You just have to look at that and go, okay, I'll just sit here. But it was a valuable lesson, and I learned. And sometimes I have to be reminded, but for the most part, that is something that is taught. You really have to learn how to just zip it for a little bit.
Kim has a favorite type of PM, I've discovered, and it's ones that are bullheaded and think they're right all the time, that over time have tempered that and have become just so pro in their field.
Exactly right.
You have to get through the first part to get to the second part.
It's true.
Agreed.
So transitioning into our show for today, Sheila, I really enjoyed working with you on the projects that we did together. And I learned so much that honestly, I'm still processing some of it all these years later. So thank you for the education. It was a great learning experience for me. And one of the things that I learned, which really stood out to me, is how well you manage the big personalities in the room. And you're able to get them to work together and to team up on some very tough and complex issues. Because that's a lot of your job, right? Is really getting alignment from those senior stakeholders and helping them work together.
Absolutely, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work going into a room when your project with the other entity, with the other person or the other group that you have to deal with, when you're not all on the same page. Part of that management is getting those folks together in a safe zone, if you will, putting all those folks together in a room and letting them sort of vent, letting them get out everything that they want, listening to what they're doing, because they all have big personalities. They all have an end goal. They all want to look like the rock star. So you have to sort of let them do that, and they have to be able to do that without anybody else seeing. There's steps and hierarchies that you have to go through, and luckily for me, one of them was tribal leaders. Those were my bosses. Once they said go, this is what you have to get done. That wasn't the process of A to B. It was you get to B. How you get there is totally you. So when everything sort of goes down the timeline or the line of succession, you have tribal leaders tell you what to do. Then you now have all the attorneys. And Kim loved working with attorneys. So you have all these attorneys who basically do not work for you. They work for your bosses. So you have to find a way.
Influencing without authority.
Exactly. I have zero authority over these people, and they all know it. So you have to get them to a point where they trust you. Mm-hmm. You get them what they need, and sort of just managing the whole process. The first part is getting them in a room and getting them to work as a unit, which means everybody has to do a little compromising. Everybody has to move an inch or two to get to where everybody agrees.
Do you do that via fun icebreaker team building exercises? Is there a structure that you follow, or do you let them just yell it out?
It works more often to let them yell it out.
Okay.
You use all the tools in your toolbox, whether, you get them out, you talk to them one-on-one, you let them know that you're listening to them one-on-one. You're basically directing a little orchestra, if you will. So you want to make sure that, if the drum section needs to have a solo at that point, you let the drum section have the solo, but you have to let them all get to where they're feeling like they've been heard. And I think that's probably the hardest thing, is that you do it in multiple ways, but for the most part, they all have to feel like they're contributing. They all have to feel like they've gotten their part done and their issue addressed. And then once that's okay, then you as the manager, as Kim will attest to, I've said multiple times okay, now we're going to go into this room. There are the other people in there. You talk, you die. I do the talking. If I need your assistance on a topic or an issue, I will ask you for it, but you don't get to talk here. So while you're doing all of that, they know that at least you're conveying what they want you to convey. As I told Kim, it's a lot of kabuki theater.
Can we go back just a little bit? You mentioned creating a safe place when you bring them together. So do you mean giving everybody a chance to be heard? Or can you talk a little bit more about that?
People tend to edit themselves if they're around their bosses, number one. If they're around people so in our case, it was tribal leaders. If the tribal leaders in there, they tend to mute and edit themselves. You need to have them not have to do that. Like you said, they're all strong personalities. If you don't let them get everything out in the beginning, it will come out in the most inopportune time. And because they will get it out sooner or later. So you don't want them to. So the safe zone for me is a place where they can say whatever they want. I'm not going to tell anybody what they say. So that to me is a safe zone, a room where everybody can talk freely. Nobody is going to use anything against you. And you have to develop that relationship early on with them. And so that they know that is their safe place.
So whenever you start these meetings, is there some sort of standard spiel that you have there? Like, today we're going to yell at each other about this stuff, but it's all within this room. Like, do you have like a standard way you approach this, or is it just based off of the relationships you've developed individually with each person in the room, that then everybody comes in the room, it's like, oh, it's Sheila. Well, we're going to talk to each other the way we talk to Sheila. So here we go. I hate this idea. It's dumb. It doesn't give me what I want. Your turn.
Yes, exactly. And it was out of a long-term relationship, if you will, with each one of these folks. That's not something you can do coming in cold at all, because they're not going to trust you. So I've known these folks for years and years, and we've been through a lot of battles together. So when they went in the room with me, it was that, it's Sheila, so we can yell. And I guarantee you that there were people calling in on conference calls, people hanging up on each other. It gets pretty hairy, but at the end of the day, you come back in, everybody takes a deep breath, and you go forward. And I am not above, locking them in the room until they stop without food or water.
I've seen that. So just to recap, so we're starting off with our tribal leaders in your case, or, in a business setting, maybe a pure business setting, maybe more like your executive C-level people. And they're going to send in their next level down. They're going to send them into your project or your initiative with a mission. And then they're going to kind of go off on their own and work with you on that project. And so they all know that their boss is not in a room, but they all know that each one of them has to report back to their boss. And so you've got to have that free space to have that discussion and address that relationship as well as the one between those stakeholders, right?
Right. Don't ever think that, the CEOs, the CFOs, or the tribal leaders are ever going to be in that room, because they're not. They've got other things to do. So it's going to be the attorneys or their political person in charge, or whoever they decide to be at that meeting. That's going to be there. The person in charge, all they want to know is when you got it done, or when is it going to get done.
Do you have a specific example in your field for whenever you didn't have alignment? Like this was messy and you thought you could go forward, and oh no, you could not.
Oh, there's a lot of them. Probably one was you get a little bit technical in the weeds here when it comes to gaming. And so if I use acronyms or things that you don't get, just stop me. But we had been working on technical standards for about 2 years. This stuff takes a very long time. Kim knows some stuff takes a very, very long time.
It does. Anything regulatory, yeah.
Yeah. When I first met Kim, he told me that this is an easy project. We should be done in 6 months. I laughed at him and said, yeah, okay. But we'd been working on technical standards for about 2 years. I had everybody in alignment, and one person had wanted to look like a rock star and ended up in a meeting with federal officials, or state officials, I should say, and dropped a bombshell in the middle of the room and said, "What about this?" Which he never brought up in any other setting. And it literally stopped a meeting cold. I shooed everybody out of the room, including him. We stopped for 6 months until I could figure out how to get that one question done.
Wow.
Yeah, I was not happy.
I would have been so frustrated. All that work that you did to get to that point to be ready, and then just out of nowhere. That sucks.
And, you always have someone like that in the room. There is always that potential of that happening. So as much as you can manage, that was one time that, it didn't, that was the one time that was probably the biggest step backwards in what we were doing. Did it work out at the end? Yes. Did we fix it? Absolutely. But, I had to cool down first because someone was going to get hurt.
I hear you. I have a technical standard I've been working on for 2 years, and I just had a meeting recently where something like that happened. So I'm like, it's a fresh wound for me. I mean, it's identical to what you just said.
Well, I don't want to pour salt in it for you, but that, but yeah, it does, and that's the thing is it happens, and there's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is, and you have to go on because it still has to get done. So that is probably the biggest thing, is that cool down, stop, deep breath, figure out what you can do to fix it, and then move on.
To our listeners, you can see you're not alone. Look at us pros being like, and then this one person said this, and then 6 months of work undone in a sentence.
Exactly.
So I do want to come back to that idea of controlling the conversation when you're in a room, but Before we go there, what I'd like to do is talk about something you mentioned in one of our previous conversations, where although you need to have the advice from your subject matter experts or your techies, whatever the kind of project you're running, you always need to start with the policymakers, the advisors, attorneys, executives, stakeholders, or whatever you want to call them.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. As you told me when we first met, this project will take 6 months. I remember I laughed and said, I'll tell you about that in a year or so. The actual process, and for us, it was technical, it was design oriented on the techie side, but it was something that had never been done before. So the actual building of that system isn't a big deal. You guys could do that with your eyes closed. You guys had that down literally by the time we let you meet finally. You guys had it down in less than a week. 2 meetings, I think it took you to get that done. The policy, however, is a more long-term process. And without the policy, the techs don't have the roadmap of what it can and cannot do. We had people logging remotely into systems that nobody should be able to do. So, we went from the sort of security details that had to happen for people to do that, from eye scans. Remember that, Kim?
I do remember the eye scanners, yeah.
It's like, they have eye scans. I'm like, someone's been watching Star Trek way too much. And, fingerprinting and, who gets the codes to be able to get in. But without the policy guys sort of setting the rules and the parameters of the project, the tech guys would just be spinning their wheels. Yes, they built it. That would be good. But then the policy guys come and say, well, we don't want it to do X, Y, and Z. Well, it does X, Y, and Z. Well, then we have to fix it. So without the policy in the front end, the tech guys are going to have they're just going to spin their wheels and they're going to be doing the same project over and over again to fit what the policy guys want.
Right. The technical work is the easy part if they get clear direction from the policymakers. Otherwise, it's a mess.
Right. And so that was probably the one thing that was, with your help, Kim, the one thing that we did that was smart. No techies until these guys were done.
This is the same in, business tech projects, right? Where if it's not policy that you're dealing with, although in InfoSec, it's always policy that you're dealing with,
right.
Then, getting requirements from the business, right? You never spin because you don't know which version of Windows to install on a server, right? You're spinning because your business said it needs to do, it needs, point and click functionality. And you say, great, we built that. And they say it needs click and point functionality. And you're like, we built the opposite because you 2 weeks ago, you said like, you're the people who need it to do stuff. Those are the folks you're going to spin with, not necessarily the tech solution. It's so easy once you know what you're going to make.
Absolutely. And then when you're working on a level of casinos, you're dealing with government to government things that have long lasting and permanent issues that come up that, they really don't want to deal with. So you have to it's from a government to government basis. And Kim, you know what I'm talking about when you put like separate governments together, all of them have their own ideas of what to do. So yeah, if you don't get the policy right, the tech guys are never going to get it right. And your deliverable will suck.
Yes. And I think that's important for project managers out there really to understand is that, we have this mentality that, okay, I've got this project, I'm going to go do it. Let's go do it. Let's do our thing. And you think of execution maybe, but in reality, depending on the project, you may spend, in our case, what was 2 years, 3 years before we even built a single thing just in that planning phase?
Yep. You left and came back.
I did.
I left and you worked with someone new. So it works out.
So since that policy is so important, and it sounds like it takes potentially a while to get it ironed out, a year to 2 years, 3 years, that's so long. How do you get that clear direction from the policymakers? Where does that come from?
That actually just comes from them sitting down and reinforcing what the end game is. Everybody has an idea, especially when you have the policymakers aren't the tech people and they don't know how tech works. In fact, you're probably dealing with people who barely know how their iPhone works. I can text, I can take a picture, and I can talk, and I can read my emails. How the back end of that works, no clue. So what you have to do is sort of make sure that you keep pushing into the end game. It's like, we just need the rules on how this is going to work. You don't have to worry about how it gets built. You just need to know what the end game is. And a lot of it is just sitting around and talking. And, if you don't keep them on task, and I mean regularly keep them on task, they may go watch another Star Trek film and come back with new technology that isn't even real.
Is that a real thing? Did that really happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no.
It does. So they come back and say, well, I saw this on TV. It's like, you're watching Star Trek, dude. That's not real. But you have to.
Leader is like, I want Star Trek teleporters. I want to be able to beam me up and put me down in another part of the casino.
I kid you. Well, no, that would come from a lawyer more than likely, but.
That was the really interesting thing for me. It was a revelation for me for how not just policy, but in some cases, maybe even legislation gets put into place that maybe is a little funny sometimes, as you've got lawyers who are well-intentioned and they're smart guys and they're trying to build this legislation, but they don't understand. And so whatever gaps that they don't have, they start trying to fill in. And you look at it at the end, you think, you're writing policy about stuff you don't really understand. And it's can be a little scary.
When the project is actually in law, which this project was, we had to do this. And it just said it had to do X. It didn't say how it was supposed to get done. It didn't reflect any of the rules that are in place that rule this industry. It just said it had to get done. So you had to walk through all the parts and pieces. Yes, it has to get done. Yes, it's in law. Yes, it has to conform with already established regulations. And we had to build new regulations around it to fit what it had to do. So yeah, it takes a long time.
And so a lot of your role is trying to bring common sense to that, right? And trying to keep everybody on track.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Kim, you know as well as I do, I'm not the smartest tech person in the world. So I relied a lot on Kim to make sure that I was at least in the same in hitting range of what we were trying to do.
So whenever this is something I deal with a lot, you're working with people who may or may not understand the underlying technology. And, you don't want to be disrespectful and say, no, dummy, that's not how that works. How do you work with a team that just doesn't have that technical knowledge, but is making rules or trying to provide guidance to people who are building technology?
She just says, no, dummy, that's not how it works.
I mean, one of the things that I do is I'll ask for the spirit of what a piece of a rule means. Like, what is the spirit you're trying to accomplish here, right? You've written down some policy and it is a pain to implement. So what is the spirit of what you're trying to do here? Like, that's my go-to technique whenever I'm like, I don't know what this sentence means, but we have like 18 things that could do this. So what are you trying to say it should do?
I don't use the word spirit because, and Kim will tell you, I have it. Say, no, dummy, that's not how it works. But those words have come out of my mouth. But at the end of the, one thing to do is just sort of get to the bottom line is you wrote this, tell me what this is supposed to do in English, not in lawyerese, but in English. What is this sentence supposed to do? And it comes down to, it's as simple sometimes as, well, I just don't want anybody to be able to access this. Okay, well, would this work for you? Yeah, that might work. Okay. Because as a tech person and as in your field, you're right, Kate. You have like 8 things that can work. What is the one out of the 8 things that can work that will satisfy that one person? And you just got to find it.
I've also observed that to be able to have that kind of frank conversation and be productive, and also to learn the dynamics of the group between the different stakeholders, that it just takes time and a lot of social interaction. So, I mean, how do you go about that? Do you just have time together, have lunches, a happy hour? Is it that easy?
Yes, actually it is. You spend a lot of time together. Group lunches, seeing how they interact with each other, inviting people for happy hour. I've had project meetings where one year it was on St. Patrick's Day. I felt bad for them, so I brought in Guinness and roast beef sandwiches. You just have to let them watch how they interact with each other. It's easy to know, especially if you're in a business where you see them working all the time, which in my business you do, not necessarily on a project, but you see them interacting with other people all the time, whether it's in a business setting or a social setting. And you just have to watch the interactions. There are people who naturally just don't like each other. There are people who look like they don't like each other, but in reality, they probably, go out for happy hour and have play dates with their kids, on the weekends, or play golf. As you're watching this, you can find out who's talking to who, who's friends with who, how they're going to react in a simple setting, and use all of that to help you manage them in the long run.
It's funny. I have a coworker who I really adore, and I have felt honored to have him just tell me directly, like, I hate those guys. I just hate working with them. And it's that you're asking me to work with people that I hate. And I was like, now I have a new piece of information about how to make things happen.
Right.
Like, it's nicer to have them just tell you if you're not picking it up from that. But that took that's relationship building over the course of 2 years with me and my coworker.
Yeah. And once that happens, it is so freeing to be able to say, oh, okay, now I know.
Right.
You just thought they were being a very obstructionist in the beginning. It's like, why are you doing that? That makes no sense until you figure out, well, you really don't like them. So that makes sense. It is a lot of just learning all those parts and pieces of everybody's personality. And it does take time. That is something that you can't do overnight.
And it sounds like you have to be observant and listen, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, because when you
Yes.
go to the happy hour, it's not just you're not there to have, well, you can have fun, I'm sure, but you also have to listen and be aware, right?
Yeah, always make sure, especially when you're in the middle of a project, you can set up all of these social interactions for people, but always remember you're the one that's working. You're giving them time to take a breather, to let off some steam, but you still have to be the one working. And that means, look, have a good time, but keep your ears open, keep your eyes open, and try to interact with them as much as possible, because in the end, all those tools are going to help you get to where you need to be.
So we talked a little bit about building that trust, building the interactions, getting with the right level of stakeholder and getting them engaged. Let's talk about the fact that at some point, to get executive alignment, you've got to bring them together to get that alignment, right?
Yes.
And that's not something to enter into lightly.
No. No, because they're usually not on the other side of the fence and they want something different than what you want. So let's start with the fact that you've done all your homework. All your guys on your side of the table are cool. You now know what you're going to now present to the other side. The other side has probably done the same thing that you've done, if they're good. And so they're going to come back with you with the list of things. Now, you have a counterpart on that end that is tasked with the same thing you are tasked with, which is getting it done. I was lucky enough that my counterpart on the other end, we were friends. We weren't close friends, but we could talk to each other and be cordial. And at some point, you have to bring that other person in on the other side and sort of agree to sort of the terms of a negotiation, if you will. How are we going to handle, because they're dealing with people that have strong personalities as well. And so you're both keeping, and all those people are in the room. It's not just the two of you. All of those people are in the room. So you have to figure out how you are going to manage not only now your folks, you're managing the negotiations with the other people. As Kim puts it, I like to call that kabuki theater sometimes. Everybody has to have a role.
There's so many levels to it.
It becomes a little rough, but in the long run, you have to remember that everybody needs to get to the end of this. It's not an option of you just dropping it. You have to get to the end. You have to finalize the project. It has to get rolling. If you can, and what I've always done is I've gone to have coffee right before our meetings with the person on the other side and said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say this, and you're going to say, well, we just can't do that. You're going to act mad. I'm going to acquiesce a little bit to a little bit of it. And you basically script out what you're going to say in front of them. So everybody looks like they have a win. That Kim knows that's kabuki theater.
It's funny because I definitely tend to lean to we've done so much good negotiation outside of this meeting, and we've resolved all of our bumps and bruises, and we're going to come in here and it's going to be just so nice, and we're going to just have a nice walk through the woods. It's going to be filled with cartoon animals and everything will be great. And you're talking about the opposite, where it's oh no, we want to stage the war or the fight that needs to happen and we're going to stage it so we know how it's going to go and we know how it's going to end, but we need to show that there was conflict, we accounted for this conflict, in letting people talk through their different points of view and let their concerns be raised and let that emotion essentially be shown about that care around what decisions are being made. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, because everybody needs to come out with a win, right? Everybody has to feel like they got their part of the bargain. And I know it sounds weird, but you're never going to do the walk through the woods. That just doesn't happen. At least in my experience, it's never happened. But have I gotten things done? Absolutely. But everybody really has to walk out of there feeling like they got their piece of the pie. So a lot of it is just managing that part of it so that when they get to go to their bosses, remember, the underlying part of it is they don't work for you. They have to go back to their real bosses and say, I got what we needed out of this, right? So everybody has to look like they have a win. And nobody wants to look like they rolled over and played dead.
They've got to be able to come back in good conscience and say, I went and I fought for it, and be able to.
Exactly. I fought for this. I fought for you. You can rest assured that all of your, concerns have been answered, and I got a win for you, because everybody needs to go back to their boss to say that. You don't want to be the one person in the room that says, okay, so I didn't get this one piece. So you really do have to let them all feel like they are a winner in all of this, that they got their piece of the pie, that they got their concern addressed, fought hard. And you, as the PM, the project manager, you are the last person in the world to get the pat on the back, because you need everybody else to. So I'm not so concerned about what I look like in this. If someone wants to say, yeah, oh boy, I told Sheila, and you have to stand there and go, yeah, you did. Dang. But that's all part of it. I wish it was the walk in the woods and smelling the flowers, because our end did all the work. The fact of the matter is what I do. The other end is doing the exact same thing as we're doing. And they're coming in with their goals and their issues. And more often than not, they're not the same thing.
We talked a little bit about this, maybe jokingly being like kabuki theater, and we talked about orchestration, but I want our listeners to understand that this is really real stuff going on that we really have to try to understand and try to manage, right? There are real careers at stake. There's major policy issues at stake. These are things that we really have to plan into going into these big meetings, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is, we laugh about it because, Kate, time heals all. And you can laugh about it later, but, during the time, you really have to keep your head about you, because the wounds are real and they're fresh, and you get angry, and those are not things that are helpful to the process. And Kim will tell you, there's sometimes I've gone home, and funny you call this happy hour, but that is exactly what I would do. So have a big glass of wine and sit and, look at the ceiling and go, why me? But
oh my gosh, post frustrating meeting for me yesterday, I had a extra large slice of turtle pie. I was like, this is how I'm going to get through this. Like, I'm going to overdose on delicious caramel chocolate, whatever this is, ice cream. It's so good.
Mine would be good dark chocolate in a good glass of red wine.
Equally good.
Honestly, Sheila, it's no coincidence this podcast is called PM Happy Hour at all.
But yeah, so it's real policy, it's real regulation, it's real. You're setting up something that someone's going to come behind you and look at as well. So there's real consequences to everything that you're doing, and so you have to understand that while we can laugh at it now and call it what we want to now, at the time it was stressful, and you're going through all that stress, and it's difficult. And unless you have your wits about you, I've watched people fold quickly in this industry, and it's hard to watch because they implode from stress.
The stakes are really, really high.
Because it sounds like you're making a policy decision that's going to last either for forever or until you repeat this process again, which sounds delightful and like 2 years of fun. And then from that policy, right, if it was misunderstood or something went in that like didn't make sense, or, adds millions of dollars of work to a project, like that affects the bottom line, that affects, how you'd get more funding into your infrastructure and other services. That's a lot of weight to bear, right? Because that's the weight that people are feeling in this conversation, right? If this doesn't go well, if we're required to do X things or get taxed in this way or whatever comes out of it, right? It's like, well, that's going to affect people on my side because it's government policy decisions. Like that's very stressful. It
is. And you're right. These are long-term consequences to what you're doing. And if it adds more money to the bottom line, as I spoke about what Indian gaming does for the tribes, that is money that's not going to a school, to healthcare. That's money that is being spent on something that you made the mistake on by not taking this all the way through the end, shortcutting it, or, that will add bottom, when someone comes in 5 years down the road and said, well, why did they do it this way? That's crazy, but it's going to cost me thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to fix what they just did. That's on you. And so there are real consequences to these things. And so, you have to kind of think about it in those terms. That's why it becomes so stressful, because, you make a mistake, there's real money cost to that.
Can we talk about that moment of truth? So you've had your preliminary discussions, you've talked with your counterpart on the other side, and you understand how things kind of need to be staged or set up going into it. You've got some preliminary alignment. Now you walk into the room, you've got the 20-foot walnut conference room table, and everybody's sitting around that table, and you sit down and you finally get to that minimum. And something that you or DG had mentioned was that it's really important to control the conversation. And can you talk through some of those techniques? I was really interested, especially in that idea of positing their positions for them and how that whole thing goes.
I'm a big advocate of having only one person talk in the room. It can digress really quickly if you have a lot of people talking at the same time. What you want to do is you want to make sure as you're discussing the project with your other side, that you literally address everybody's concern around the room. You give them that you have heard, you are talking, you know what it is you're talking about by saying, so we had a tribe, and you don't have to use names, but you can say, we have someone here or a tribe that is very concerned about this part of the project or the cost on this. And you basically go around the room and make sure that you've addressed everything. And Kim, as well as I do, is once you get the head nodding from your side, you got them under control, and that's good. You've addressed everything along the lines. They know that you've heard them and you're working into what they want to see happen. It's going to happen the same way on the other side. They're going to do the same thing.
So you're literally going to maybe one person saying, all right, Joe or Joe's team, they have this concern that this policy is going to have this bad effect. Over here, we have Jane and Jane's team, and they have a different viewpoint on that exact ssame policy because they can see a big benefit from it. And you talk through both of those, and you literally go around the table like that.
Yes, absolutely. Because you want everybody to, number one, feel like you've addressed their specific concerns. Not that they're not already on the same page already, but you want the other side to also know that these are the concerns that you've worked through. You present basically after the end of this, so this is how we came to conclusion. These are the things that we would like to do. Now you're negotiating with the other side because they're not going to be on the same page as you. And Kim, you walk through the same where their IT folks and their lawyers weren't even close to where we were. And sometimes it was bringing them along a little bit, working with a lesser experienced IT team. And that was a little tough for you, I know, because you'd come out of there going, you've done this part on your side, this part of the project on your side of it, and you've done all this work, and you just have to start it all again with now different players that aren't on your side. Never-ending battle.
I really like that technique of, I think DG called it positing their positions for them. You're saying, here's your position, and you're saying that, and you're just really using that as a way to start the conversation. And even when it's appropriate, you might even pose questions that you know the answer to just to get that point out on the table.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm a big proponent of, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to, and never ask a question that you are questioning. That just looks like you don't know what you're doing.
Can you say that one more time? That's a great piece of advice.
What? Never ask a question that you don't know the answer to?
Yes.
In the stakeholder decision meeting, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, all it does is if you don't know the answer and it comes back as a bad answer, you might be in that 6-month window of, oh God, we got to stop and start all over again. So it is finally made it to almost the end, and you got to make sure that everybody understands that you understand absolutely everything they've done so far.
Now, a couple other points that we mentioned in our conversation the other day leading up to this podcast were a couple techniques for helping drive negotiation to a common position. And those were finding common ground and building on that, or
understanding some kind of a common foe or a common enemy to drive people together. Can you talk about those two techniques?
Nothing brings people closer than a common enemy. And that sounds bad, but it does change people's attitude a little bit. Every project doesn't have the same interaction and the same dynamics. In what I do, there is always a common enemy. It may be a federal rule, it may be state legislation, it may be the administration not working with you in a process that you feel is fair. So once everybody agrees that that is your common enemy, you would be surprised how they sit down and figure out what it is they want, and everybody's on the same page. That actually is an easy one. It doesn't always happen because you can't really get mad at the other side if it's just an IT problem, right?
Right.
But when it comes down to policy problems, you actually can have a common enemy. When it's not, the stakes aren't that high, you can actually try to find some common ground. It's easy to say, we both want the same thing, but I can't go as far as you want to go. Why can't we meet in the middle somewhere? And sometimes that works as well. But, luckily for me or unluckily for me, all my stuff is policy driven. So it tends to have a little bit more of a us versus them mentality than the other way around.
So once you finally get that agreement, how do you, just make sure that nobody backtracks? How do you say, great, I've locked you down, you're a human, and now I'm going to lock you in this point in time and not let you backtrack to a previous point in time because now you said you're fine and that's the end. So Be good about it.
Be good and be gone. Or be good or be gone. It is, the most important part of at least this particular project was once they agreed upon it, then it was incumbent upon us to get the tech people working quickly. Once the project starts and it starts getting implemented, it's hard to pull back. So once we had the policy done, once we knew what it was going to do, once we had the agreement with the state of sort of the process of which it was going to get done, then it is incumbent upon you to start moving quickly. The IT part is fast. The actual implementation is quick. And if you need to slow it down, you need to slow it down. One of the ways we slowed it down was they wanted to bring them all up at the very same time. So that we're talking 6 systems up at the same time in various parts of the state of Arizona. And it was no, we're going to slow you down. You're going to do one at a time. And this one's going to run for what I think was 6 months.
It was.
Was it a six months? You're going to run it for 6 months, make sure that there's no problem, and then you're going to bring the second one online, and so forth and so on. But the best way to make sure that nobody backs out is to get the systems in the process moving as quickly as possible. That way, they have no chance to back out and change their mind.
Do you do any expectation setting around that, or do you get it all figured out and then turn around and say, go? Like I tend to lean on the all right, great. So excited that you've agreed to this. Cause now that it's agreed to, we're going to go do this. Like I try to really couch what's going to happen next. So do you do that? Or you kind of go great and turn around and make it happen?
You go, okay, the tech people are going to start next week. They're going to start working. Framework will be done X, Y, and Z because like I said, the tech part of it was the easy part. And I could rely on Kim to tell me, we'll have the design done in two meetings. It took them literally 2-3 meetings to get the design work done on it. And this is, I literally drew straws of who was going to go up first. This person's already ready to go. Let's start them first. And you go down the line. And you basically say, these are the timelines at which these are going to happen. And that locks everybody in. And you can always push the timeline a little bit. But once they see it on paper that this is how it's going to roll out, by that time it was off the policy plate. It was on to the actual development and implementation. And that's between the IT folks and the state IT folks. The design was done and we're ready to roll. And I am now thankfully out of the process.
Now you're at home with a glass of wine and some dark chocolate.
That would be it.
I'm done.
Yes, I am done. And on to the next thing.
What were your thoughts about this episode? What did you think when you re-listened to it? What struck you?
So I love this episode. I cite it all the time in my risk training and negotiation training, decision making. I really cite it a lot, but it was really good for me to go back and review because there's actually a lot of things that I had sort of forgotten. I was so focused on her walking through her decision-making process that there were some really important communication things that I had lost sight of. So the phrase posit their positions, like I had forgotten about that phrase altogether, which is the idea that, when you're in a room with a lot of people, maybe they're not familiar with each other or they have different concerns, is for you to help prompt people to get them to share. One of the things Sheila said, the thing that was one of the hard things she learned was how to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And this really positing positions is really putting out there and say, Joe, my understanding is your position on this is this. And Mary, I think if I understand right from our last conversation, you're concerned about that. Because a lot of times people won't volunteer that. Maybe they're shy, maybe just culturally they're not ready for that. And so if you're facilitating these kinds of discussions where there's negotiation or you need to get everybody's opinions out and accounted for, you maybe need to prepare to help prompt people for that and pull them into the conversation. And I'd forgotten that. And I was really glad to re-listen to this and reconnect on that.
I think for me, in the 7 years or 8 since we've done this episode, one thing that's interesting to me is that one of the things she talks about in the episode is she says, you can stage a fight, basically.
Yeah.
And I heard her say that. I remember her saying that. And I have never staged a fight in the 7 years since we first talked to her. But if you were to ask me today, Kate, what's the lesson you learned the hard way? It would be that you have to let the emotions that people feel be out in the ether. You can't hide them behind closed doors and then think you're going to have an effective meeting with everybody in the same room. You actually have to make those people say those things to each other. She talks about it in a couple different ways. One is her, safe space, locking everybody in a room and getting everybody to decide. That's huge. But the other thing too is like when it's time to do big decisions, when it's time to really make a point and letting people feel like they win. You can't have people feel like they win if you orchestrate things perfectly so that there's no emotions that show up during the conversation. You need to allow the space for conflict to happen, which as a person who, I don't want to say I hate conflict, but prefers meetings to go as I have instructed them to go. I mean, she gives me an option, right? By saying, stage the fight, Kate, just stage it. And I didn't really take that away in a big way. And I've also seen that not every environment can handle a staged fight. But I don't know. I was just like, man, she is right about that. Staging a fight is huge. And also letting those emotions play out in those rooms with those folks is huge. Because otherwise, just like she said, you will get them coming up at an inopportune moment, which I think sucks. Those will come up when, towards the end of the episode, I asked, like, how do you get going? How do you get started? And, she says, I turn to Kim and Kim tells me we're going to have everything done in 2 weeks. And then we'll start building the system. Because as she said, that is the easy part.
Yep.
But there are people that I've worked with who within those 2 weeks would change their whole minds on the system. And I think it's because I have at times not let people have their emotions out in the room. So I was struck by how much of a lesson that is I learned the hard way, despite hearing about it. And I admire Sheila. She's incredible. But despite hearing about it, I was like, man, that one didn't sink in. Like I didn't really absorb that day.
Yeah, there were a lot of wisdom there. And one of the things that really jumped out, which relates to what you said in positive positions, is people need to feel like they've been heard.
Mm-hmm.
And how important that is. And it's funny. So way back when I was working with Sheila, I was working with the Arizona tribes, but now I'm actually engaged in my communities, Alaska Native organizations. I'm on the board of directors for one of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act corporations.
What a cool, full circle moment for us. This is so neat because you were recently inducted, invited, hired. What is the right word to use?
I was selected, I guess, interviewed and selected. Yeah.
Selected to be on the board of your hometown Native corporation. And so here you are doing the exact same thing as what Sheila has been doing. This is so cool.
Yeah. One of the things that really stood out for me was this idea of letting people speak. And the Southeast Alaska has a lot of tribes. It has a lot of communities. It has corporations. It has other important bodies in the Native community. And we all came together a couple months ago to maybe start trying to work together and forming a working group after, 20 years of not having done so for that area. And so we all came together, and it was exactly as Sheila had said in practice. We had an agenda, all these things we're going to do. And here I am, project manager. I have an agenda. All right, we're going to go here. Why aren't there time boxes on these? I didn't understand. And the first part was sort of introduction and discussion. And that introduction took the entire agenda. They ended up throwing the entire agenda away. And it turns out each group that had come, they gave the mic to, and they shared, okay, here's who we are and here's what we're about. And here are the challenges that we see right now that we need to work together as a group on. And, here are our main challenges. And they went around the room and they basically threw out the entire agenda because that had been so productive. And the whole exercise was allowing people to be heard. And it was just like Sheila said, when you're in a big group like that, you need to let people feel like they're heard before you can really, if somebody doesn't feel like they're heard, they're not going to buy into probably anything else in that meeting or any decisions.
Yeah. And just like we said earlier, it is critical that as a senior project leader or program leader, you understand the moments where it's more productive to just hear people than it is to focus on tactical details. And I think Sheila laid that out fantastically for how to do that.
I also was refreshed in my understanding of how important it is to be patient. If you've got a large group of stakeholders and they are big decision makers, especially if there's some negotiation involved, you have to give yourself and them time to build the relationships. You're not going to show up in a room with a bunch of strangers and be able to manage that boardroom very well. They don't know each other. You don't maybe know them. And so you need to put some time and effort and time into developing those relationships and getting to know them.
And one of the things I took away, something I think she implied but did not say, was your relationship is built off of the actions you take when you're not in those big meetings. One of the things she mentions at one point, she's like, I'm not going to say anything about what they said. But the only way for her to prove that to those people is that they had to trust her in the first place to say something that they were worried about. She had to not go repeat that to other people and strategically choose how she was going to manage the information she'd been entrusted with. And that is a judgment decision that I feel like we don't understand until later in our careers. I have a friend working at a company, and my friend's manager would say to them, we haven't hit our targets yet. There is a peer to my friend on their team who would say, the firm is hemorrhaging money. And the choice of those words is what Sheila is talking about whenever she says build, like these are relationships I built over time. Sheila would say, we have not hit our targets yet. And an immature project manager, an immature leader would say, we're hemorrhaging money. Hemorrhaging money implies the firm doesn't know what they're doing, that there's chaos. Oh my gosh, right? But Sheila would never speak that way, right? She respects these people she works with. She's working on a plan. And at that senior level, right, if a firm is struggling with finances, whether or not you're hemorrhaging money, the discussions need to stay productive, which means you need to take out emotional words like hemorrhaging versus we have not hit our targets yet. And that's the thing that we could probably spend a whole episode on that. But I was struck by when she said, I built these relationships over years. She's made hundreds of choices like that in those relationships that demonstrate the respect, discernment, and her own professional ability to manage these situations that make these leaders trust her, just by the nature of who she is. So I was really struck by man, Sheila is so good at this.
She is. And one thing you maybe couldn't see in the episode is all that work is she's been putting years and years of work into that. And I know having the small amount of time that I work with her and her team was that not only was she respected on her team, but also those that she worked on behalf of her stakeholders, but also those sort of on the other side of the conference table, they had a lot of respect for her because she was very trustworthy. She took care of her people. She just did a fantastic job. And that's something, I think we can all strive to.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Sheila is incredible.
I was really fortunate in the time that I got to work with Sheila that I really got a lot of fantastic mentorship from Sheila, as you can probably tell listening to this episode.
If you're sitting here thinking, I wish I had a mentor or help here. I'm here to tell you that between Kim and I, we have seen every flavor of project chaos, and we know how to fix it. So when things get messy on your projects, we will help you spot what's really going on and give you the exact tool to handle it. We're not cookie cutter coaches. We're not focusing on obscure jargon. We're going to make sure that you get the exact steps that you need to get back into control of your project and your team. And you're going to know when you're on the right path and exactly what to do when you're not.
This is one-on-one coaching with me or with Kate, and as such, seats are really limited. But you can go to pmhappyhour.com/coachme and get on our wait list and perhaps join our next cohort.
I can't wait to coach a new person. So cheers to that, Kim.
Cheers to our next round of coachees.
And that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you liked our show, please leave a review and a comment on iTunes or wherever you get our podcast. Your review really does mean a lot. And if you want to check out our membership site and all of our cool content there, you can check that out at pmhappyhour.com/membership. If you want to talk to us directly about project management, PM consulting, training, or whatever, our contact info is on our website under About Your Hosts, or you can just hit us up on our Facebook site at PM Happy Hour. You'll find we're really pretty easy to get a hold of there. And that's it for today. Good luck with your projects, and we hope to catch you again at the next PM Happy Hour. Cheers.